One of the most fascinating figures in Mormon history is Eliza R. Snow. She was one of the better educated and eloquent converts to the faith when she joined the church in the Kirtland era, and she was already a published poet and hymnist. She soon became known as the Poetess of Zion and authored a number of the most beloved hymns within the tradition. She was also secretly sealed to Joseph Smith as a plural wife in Nauvoo, and then later became a plural wife of Brigham Young, often seen as one of the most elect ladies and first ladies in the Mormon tradition. And she spent her life helping forge leadership positions for LDS women. She was a secretary to the Relief Society in Nauvoo. She helped organize and then preside over Relief Societies in Utah, and she served as presidentess and oversaw the temple rituals once temples were starting to be completed in Utah territory. And thankfully, we now have a new compilation of her discourses as a religious speaker. It was produced by the LDS Church History Department, and it was edited by Jennifer Reeder, Sherilyn Howcroft, Elizabeth Keene, and Jessica M. Nelson, titled Rise Up and Speak, the collected discourses of Eliza R. Snow, that is also available for free online. It's the latest of several really important volumes on LDS women produced by the LDS Historian's Office. So in this video, I want to do a few things. I want to highlight some of the excellent work that has been produced by the Church Historical Department in Salt Lake City in recent years. Then I'm going to introduce this new volume and interview one of its editors, my good friend Dr. Jennifer Reeder. And then I'll provide some of my own analysis and concluding thoughts on the work and why I strongly recommend it. Let's dig in. The LDS Church History Department has done a lot to correct the male-centered nature of Mormon history. And to be fair, this has been a low standard to overturn given the long male-centered nature of church history. Even more recently in the 1970s, when Leonard Arrington in the Church Historical Department envisioned a 16-volume series to be published as part of the church's 150th anniversary for 1980, not a single one of those volumes was to be edited by a woman, nor were any of the volumes going to be focused on women's history. And all the official church histories up until that point also often downplayed or minimized or even silenced women's voices and women's contributions. And there was a worry in more recent years that that history might continue due to especially the patriarchal nature of the church and the anxiety to focus on the great men, the prophets and apostles of the past. The Joseph Pavers Project could have signaled a move to, again, just focus on the men who have led the church. Thankfully, the JSP itself did a lot, especially in the footnotes and supplemental materials, to highlight the women who appear and don't appear in that volume. But we've been very fortunate that that has not been the case, that instead we've had a number of really important volumes on women's history produced by the church. And I'm very proud to have several of them, featured on my own shelves behind me. So perhaps one of the most important volumes produced by the church in recent years is the first 50 years of Relief Society. This is a huge, humongous volume. I think the kids call it thick. That focuses on the first 50 years of Relief Society from 1842 to 1892. Included in this volume is the Relief Society records from Nauvoo, one of the most important records ever produced by the church that has its own complicated history that maybe I'll discuss in a future volume. This is a stellar volume that I strongly recommend. And then more recently, we have At the Pulpit, 185 Years of Discourses by Latter-day Saint Women, which goes through every decade and compiles an important discourse given by Mormon women to show how crucial they have been to understanding our history. And importantly, all of these volumes are also available for free online. I'll add links in the video description so you can go check them out. And this goes along with other digitized sources like the Diaries of Emmeline B. Wells, another one of the most important women and just individuals in general in Mormon history. So it's really great, wonderful work that's being done by a core group of women historians at the Church History Department. By the way, before I go much further, just a reminder that if you enjoy this type of nerdy content, especially that highlights and celebrates new work being done that allows us to reassess and reckon with the past, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I try to do deep dives on topics every Monday. I connect the past with the present on Wednesdays, and on Wednesdays I pull back the curtain on the historian's craft, which includes lots of interviews with authors of new and important volumes, like in this video. And if you want to give back to make sure that we can continue this work, you can become a member of this channel, where for a very nominal fee, you get early access to the videos, you get little icons next to your name, and you get to feel good knowing that you are helping us, me and my wonderful producer Anthony, dedicate our time necessary to do these topics justice. I also recommend subscribing to my free Kit newsletter, a link in the video description, so you can keep up on all my activities on different platforms and news and updates and upcoming events, and my different social media platforms where I produce shorter videos that often supplement these longer discussions. And mark your calendar for the next live video discussion, which will be Wednesday, March 4th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. I do these monthly live discussions that are always lots of fun because it allows me to both respond to questions you have and further build this community, which I really appreciate. All right, let's get back to today's topic at hand. With the Church History Department's focus on women's history, it seems natural that they would turn their attention to Eliza R. Snow, whose figure and voice and activities loom large over Mormon history writ large and Mormon women's history in particular. She was involved in church leadership positions from Nauvoo up until the late 1880s. She helped organize the Relief Society, the Young Women's Organization, the Primary. She was a plural wife of both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. And her words often appear, even in histories that don't include women's voices. You often see a poem or a hymn from Eliza R. Snow, or her recollections, her reminiscences, her quasi-memoirs that narrate and help structure how we understand the church's early decades. But we rarely think of her as a sermonizer, someone who's issuing these major discourses that shape church doctrine and teaching. So thankfully, these great historians who are behind this work, and several others, look through over 1,000 different archival records in which Eliza R. Snow's words are scattered across the remaining texts from her life. This includes over 1,600 minute books of these local societies who had gathered together and heard women speak, including Eliza R. Snow, totaling over 480,000 pages, as well as 400 issues of the LDS women's newspaper, The Woman's Exponent. And eventually, at the end of this major sleuthing, they found 1,300 discourses from Eliza R. Snow. Then they transcribed them using triple verifications, to where they transcribe it, they look it over again, and they look it over a third time, which means you can really trust what they're transcribing. These sources vary dramatically. Some are very long, others are short summaries, which is just the nature of the historian's craft. And thankfully, after all that work, we have two products, both the online product, which I'll add a link in the video description. You can find all of the 1,300 discourses online in a wonderful digestible format, but now we also have a beautiful, gorgeous physical volume that will be released next week that really belongs on your bookshelves. And to talk about it, I was very privileged to be joined a few days ago by one of the editors, my longtime and good friend, Dr. Jennifer Reeder, who received her PhD in American history from George Mason University, and she is one of the leading experts, not just on early Mormon women's history, but also material culture, something that you'll see tie in at the very end. All right, let's get to my discussion with Dr. Reeder. I'm now very grateful to be joined by the wonderful Dr. Jennifer Reeder, who is kind enough to spend some time with me to discuss this great book and answer some of my questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Reeder.
Oh, I'm so excited to be with you, and I'm so excited to share this book.
Show the book. Let's see the book on camera. Look at that. That is a wonderful, gorgeous.
Okay, but I have to show. I love the hardcover. Is like this beautiful.
That's a gorgeous color.
Yellow, right?
Yeah. Gold.
I'm very proud.
We're spinning gold. That's what we're doing here.
That's right.
Jenny, most people are probably familiar with Eliza R. Snow as a poet or a hymnist. What might they learn from viewing her as an orator, as seen through these many discourses?
I think they will learn that she grew in her calling. Like when she was first called, she was scared to death of public speaking. And she even wrote in her memoir, when Brigham Young asked her to instruct the sisters, she said, "My heart went pit-a-pat." But she grew into it. And I think you can see that change from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. But not only did she improve her public speaking skills, but she encouraged so many others to improve theirs. And she was always the champion of women leaders. So she helped form the Young Women Organization for teenage girls and the primary organization for children. But she didn't just lead it herself. She took upon the responsibility of helping other women to lead. So I think that's really great. But I think it's also important to realize that she had such a strong theological understanding of the gospel of Jesus Christ directly from Joseph Smith. And she often refers to him as having said, "This is so important because you are a part of this kingdom that we are building." So not only did she instruct and teach others to speak, but she also taught.
And I'm glad you brought up the notion of leadership. So how does recognizing Snow as a leader, as a religious mover and shaker, including her role as a leader of the Relief Society, helping founder of the primary and the Young Women's, help us understand the overall narrative of Mormon history? In other words, how might we understand the LDS tradition better if we place Snow alongside other great orators like Orson Pratt or Sidney Rigdon?
Right, right. I think that's a really good question. So we have dug through hundreds and hundreds of minute books trying to find her. So one thing that's different is that Orson Pratt and Sidney Rigdon basically had people collect all their speakings, their talks, and they were published and easily findable. Eliza's are not, simply because I believe she was a woman. So she tried to record her words. We only have probably in this book 2 or 3 of her discourses are written out. The rest of them are recorded by secretaries, and sometimes those secretaries are more educated than others and some are less educated than others. And so you can kind of tell, looking at the minutes, if someone had English as a first language or if they had an education. But it's really cool to see how she spoke through all of that. So we found almost 1,300 discourses, which is astounding. And I think that also recognizing the fact that so many people would hear her and talk about it for forever, about hearing Eliza R. Snow speak. So there's also that. She connected with the people. She drove all over, well, rode trains and drove wagons all over the territory and up into Idaho and down into Nevada to meet with women. And I don't know, well, obviously Sidney Rigdon had a totally different realm of preaching. But this, I think this is super significant.
Your introduction has a section that talks about a woman for her time. And another way to say that is she's also a woman of her time. So
Right.
How might people learn more about the broader American context that she often reflected and absorbed and expressed in her words?
Well, I think one example is something that is contextual, and that is the role of women stemming from Eve in the Garden of Eden in the Bible. And she often talked about the need to overcome the curse of Eve. And this was a common conception among many religious thought thinkers. But she takes it a step further to contextualize it within her Mormon context. So she is a firm believer in polygamy, and she teaches several times that polygamy is the only way that women can overcome the curse of Eve. At the same time, and I think this may be a little bit different from her religious context, she talked about women were responsible for their own salvation. So in a way, this kind of escapes the whole idea of coverture. They could not rely on their husbands for salvation, or their fathers, or their brothers, or their sons. They had to figure it out themselves. So it's an interesting intermix of all of these things.
Yeah, so let's stick on that point for just a minute, because I'm sure a lot of my viewers are going to be interested in her perspective on polygamy. She was sealed to Joseph Smith as a plural wife in Nauvoo, and then she was married to Brigham Young as a plural wife in Utah. So how does polygamy shape her experience? How does that show up in her teachings? And how might we get a better perspective of polygamy as practiced and believed by looking through her discourses?
That's a really good question. And I do want to correct one thing. She was sealed to Brigham Young in Nauvoo after Joseph's death,
Thank you.
October
Yep,
of
right.
1844. But
Yep.
she lived publicly as his wife in the Lion House. And I think that was huge. And she was often the, I don't know what word you would use, confidant or partner with Brigham Young in leadership ways that some of his other wives were not able to. So I think she's very clear about it. I love that throughout her talks, we get little bits and pieces of her own biography that we don't get anywhere else. So that in and of itself is valuable. But she talks about how when she first heard about polygamy, how it was repugnant. She couldn't even fathom it, the idea of it. But then later, she talks about how Joseph Smith was the crown of her heart and the love of her life. So she had a very valuable, important relationship with Joseph. And she also felt it her responsibility to teach what he taught her. And she would take the Nauvoo Relief Society minute book, that she kept those minutes. And we have 6 sermons that Joseph gave specifically to women that are not recorded in other places. She would read those to women. And in fact, I love this. I just discovered this. She, on the anniversary of his death, June 27th, 1844, she would pull together women that were wives of Joseph, as well as Nauvoo Relief Society sisters. And they would read his words together in a way to commemorate him. So she dearly loved Joseph, and she even had a gold watch that she would often take with her in her travels, where she would allow children to hold it and to know that Joseph had given her this watch, and they grew up talking about this experience and that she had been a wife of Joseph Smith. And I think that's incredible to have a little relic of that. So then with Brigham Young, she really became... she was the de facto General Relief Society president, and she was he assigned her to help bishops organize relief societies and to instruct the sisters. So she took that very specifically and went all over the territory, excuse me, and would bring experiences and relationships with those women back with her to Salt Lake City, where she could share them with Brigham Young and later John Taylor. She was not as close with John Taylor as she was with Brigham Young. But I also think it's interesting that she was not officially given the title of General Relief Society president until 1880 under the direction of John Taylor. And I think this is interesting. John Taylor had been at that first Nauvoo Relief Society meeting. In the meanwhile, Brigham Young had helped organize, had led the organization of ward relief societies. And then right before he died, he had the idea of stake relief societies. I think often today we think about this as a thing that's normal. We don't realize that it took a while to figure this out, just like it took a while for Joseph to figure out and Brigham Young to figure out priesthood and the temple. And also, I think it's interesting that she was not called or ordained, is the word they use, as the Relief Society president until after Emma had passed away. Emma was her predecessor, and she spoke often of Emma. Not often. I wish she had spoke more of Emma, but she recognized the role that Emma had in leading the women.
So while your collections, probably the primary audience is Latter-day Saints, and you emphasize Snow's contribution to doctrinal knowledge, I think many people are going to be interested in the historical content. You yourself are a respected, credentialed academic historian as well. So how might people interested in just American religious history writ large what might they learn from this collection? And maybe if you could point to a few discourses that they might want to see as a starting point to viewing Eliza R. Snow as a discourser.
Sure. I think one of the most significant discourses she gives is in, I think this is it. It's in 1870. And this is at a time where Latter-day Saint women are receiving a lot of backlash. It's the Republican Party's twin relics of barbarism, slavery, and polygamy. And she, I love this talk. So she was part of a group that set up this public meeting. They called it the Great Indignation Meeting in 1870 on January 13th in the Adobe Tabernacle in Salt Lake City. And I love that this room is crowded with women only. Even reporters there were women. And they say there was a very large number of people, and several subsequent meetings were held in other cities. But this was a time, and this was significant, this is a time when she actually said, and this is what we've titled this discourse, silence is no longer a virtue, where she encourages her friends and sister wives and sisters to speak up and to speak in support of religious freedom and to just have a public voice. So this is, I think, the beginning of many other things. The next talk in the book is a response. It's in 1871. It's a response to the visit of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Salt Lake City. Now, in that first meeting in 1870, January, the women, as a result of that meeting and their public fervor, they requested the right to vote. And this is a huge thing. I mean, we know that Wyoming women were given the right to vote, but they didn't hold their first election until after Latter-day Saint women held their first election, which was on Valentine's Day, 1870. Anyway, of course, this drew the attention of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they visited Salt Lake in July of 1871. Now, they were very supportive of this idea of women's suffrage, of the franchise for women, but they also disagreed with Latter-day Saint women about a lot of different things, about their family size, about young marriage, about things like that. And it drew a big, I mean, people were interested and wanted to hear what they had to say. And of course, their speeches get recorded in local newspapers. So a month later, in August of 1871, Eliza travels up to Ogden. And you have to remember that this is also a short time after the Transcontinental Railroad, which made travel a little bit easier between Salt Lake City and Ogden. And she sort of gives a rebuttal to this. She talks about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a woman of the world, and she separates the two in a very distinctive way. She basically says that God has called us out of the world, and she talks about the implications of all of that. And it's an incredible talk. She also, I'll give two more examples. She was involved in what they called the Women's Commission Store in 76, 77. And this was actually started by women the women of Utah were trying to prepare an exhibit to go to Philadelphia for the centennial celebration of the United States of America. And she gathered collections and then found out that the Utah Territorial Legislature did not provide money or funding for them to send this. So she decided to have her own territorial women's fair. And she does that. And it's a smashing success. And then Brigham Young suggests that they make a store. So they had been involved in the cooperative movement, which was a big thing for Latter-day Saints at the time in the 19th century. But this time they made a store in the old Constitution building, and we have a picture of it. It's great in the book. But she creates a space where women can sell and buy each other's work, handwork, food, all sorts of things. So I think that's significant. She says also at one point that Latter-day Saint women should be business women. They should know how to use the economy. And then lastly, she was the president of the Deseret Hospital Board. Now, they had been talking about this for years. They had sent women to medical school in Pennsylvania. And she gives a stirring speech about how we want sister physicians. She feels like it's important for women to know and understand their own bodies and their own health. In fact, there's one occasion in a speech that she gives where she talks about two young women, so these are teenage girls, about the need to know how to amputate an arm if necessary. And she just wants them to know their bodies and know their physiology and know what's going on and know how to care for them. So I love that she encourages women, and she also helps them raise money to go to medical school. And she's the president of this female board of directors for the Deseret Hospital. And she's in that position for 1 or 2 years, and then she steps down because she gets caught up in a semi scandal at the time, but she doesn't want to engage in that. She just decides to turn her attention to the Relief Society, the women's organization.
Well, those are fabulous examples. All right, so we've talked a lot about Eliza. I can't let you go without talking about my favorite subject that you're an expert on. Jenny, can you tell people what hair art is and why they should care about it?
Hair art is magical. And here's a very modern reason why you should care about it. If you see, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't decided if I want to see it. I think I do. Wuthering Heights with Margot Robbie. Is that how you say her name?
Yeah.
She is actually wearing a hair bracelet that belonged to the Brontes. And this was a bracelet that was braided and woven from their hair. And it was a very typical Victorian practice where women would put together, and also men, we have accounts of men who were imprisoned during the polygamy raids, that they would make hair bracelets or other things. So not only do they make bracelets, but they also make these beautiful, and they are beautiful, I promise, beautiful illustrations of, there's so many different ways you can arrange the hair. In the Manti Temple, they had a beautiful floral arrangement of hair, and it's incredible. And also, we're doing a temporary exhibit of Eliza R. Snow from March until September in the reading room of the Church History Library, and we are including dun 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 a hair wreath. And I found this in the basement of the Relief Society building. It is intertwined hair. It's kind of in a circle, an open circle, and there's a black girls grain ribbon at the bottom, and there's names by each of the hair. So there's Eliza R. Snow is at the top, of course, because she is the representative woman of Deseret, and Elizabeth Ann Whitney's at the bottom, and you have several other female leaders included in that. So if you want to see it, you should come.
Well, that's a pitch that I don't know how anyone would be able to turn down.
I know,
Thank
right?
you so much for joining me, Dr. Reeder.
Of course. Thank you, Ben.
In case you want to see more about what we were talking about with those hair wreaths and those hair art at the end of the discussion, here is an image that she provided for me to share with you of one of these types of hair arts that's actually very creepy, but still quite sympathetic. And if you go to the Daughter of Utah Pioneers, you'll see several other of these gorgeous hair wreaths and hair art that is, yes, again, a bit scarring, but, if you look at it through a sympathetic lens, you can see the beauty in it. Now, I want to offer a few of my thoughts on this volume that I've had the privilege to look through. It's a phenomenal project and it's worth going through. Besides the discourses that Dr. Reeder mentioned in our interview, I also really liked her 1849 discourse, The Spirit of Liberty, which explores themes of patriotism during the early Deseret period. And you can read that again for free online through their online website. There are some key themes that come through in Eliza R. Snow's discourses that I think are worth noting the commitment to priesthood authority on the one hand, yet also a desire to expand women's leadership within that patriarchal structure, that paradox that is at the heart of not just early Mormonism in general, but Eliza R. Snow's discourses, sermons, poetry, and hymns in particular. The commitment to primitivist teachings as restoring an ancient order. You really see that through line from the broader cultural context in Eliza R. Snow's world. The idea for retrenchment and desire to create a communal society, themes that seem all the more relevant in modern Mormonism, are actually birthed through these types of teachings that are found in Eliza R. Snow. The insistence on spiritual gifts, this notion of spiritual charisma that has actually been lost. So while these other themes persist, this one is accessing a lost world, and also the importance of sisterhood, creating this unity among Mormon women that I found quite moving. Notably, there are some limits in the nature of how this volume is structured that aren't going to be as useful to some historians because they're designed for Latter-day Saints. It's meant to capture the ideas that mostly correlate with current teachings rather than reflect Eliza R. Snow's context, which is expected given the nature of the volume. But thankfully, there's also lots of things that we can find online that, if you are a historical nerd like me, are even more useful. And it's also silently editing and standardizing the text to make them more readable, which again is necessary for the accessibility, but might not fit the standards of academic work. But in general, I love this volume. I think it is very worth engaging, and especially since you can find all the free online discourses on their website without having to buy this beautiful volume, but again, I strongly recommend buying the volume because it looks great on your shelf, and it's also a great way to support the work of these women's historians. Our narratives of Mormon history, including Mormon doctrine and Mormon theology, are not complete without the voice of women. And not just scattering in the voice of women like, seasoning, but actually using those voices to structure and frame and drive our narratives. That's one thing that historians have tried to correct in recent years, doing better than the long-standing church narratives that privilege male voices and only follow the narratives offered by men's ideas and experiences. And these histories produced by the Church Historians Department are just a great sign of how that is improving. But also they provide the tools, the material for us to construct a more inclusive, engaging, and accurate history of the faith, which is why I strongly recommend this new volume, Stand Up and Speak, the Discourses of Eliza R. Snow, both the physical volume and the online sources. I appreciate the work of these historians, and it's actually one of the great testaments of the Church History Department's work in later years, which is really doing a lot to correct, past mistakes. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you will now go and dig through the online sermons, which again I will link to in the video description. They remind us that history remains as relevant today as it's ever been, because these voices from the dust should allow us to reassess common misperceptions and get a better picture of the overall Mormon experience.